Hello everyone, welcome to the Geoecologist. I'm Dr. Krishnanand and you have been watching my videos on various topics of geography, environment and research methodology on my channel, The Geoecologist. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing our channel, and for the earlier lectures, you can go to our playlist section. Now, in today's introductory video on political geography, we are going to discuss the nature, approaches and scope of political geography. But before we go ahead, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also please share the videos with others as well. So now let's learn about the nature, approaches and scope of political geography. So in this video, let's understand what is political geography all about and how this subject matter evolved in the 20th century and what is its scope in future. So from the basics, if you see that the word is political geography, so it has two words, politics and geography involved. So this subject is a fusion, an amalgamation of the concepts related to politics and the concepts related to geography. So if you trace back the history, you'll observe that the term politics is derived from the Greek word polis, which we talked about in urban geography also, the cityscape system, the city landscape, and also remember the polis is also the root word for the politica, from where the politics comes into the picture from the ancient Greeks and Romans into Latin and then into English. So if you observe, the great scholar Aristotle is the pioneer of political science. He is called the father of political geography as well. And also remember that because of the multifaceted nature of the scholars in the ancient, these scholars have the knowledge of various branches of science. So if you observe what was the Aristotle's work, according to him, if you observe, a subject which is politics is related to all the activities and affairs of the city-state. That what are the important things, important ingredients that help us to govern people, right? So that is very important in terms of politics. And if you observe, it was related to the eukmene concept, that is the inhabited world and its decision making. Now if you observe the ancient India, we have another great scholar, the contemporary scholar called Chanakya or Kautilya. So right from the Mauryan Empire and his teachings in Niti Shastra, Arthashastra, very important for economic as well as the administrative and political system. So according to him, there are three types of political system. If you observe, one is called the rule making, one is the rule application, and the other is rule adjudication. So if you observe, these three facets cover the entire political science, and geography is something which is related to area, space, region. So if you combine these two, it talks about a specific entity. So further, if you observe in the works of Kautilya, the diplomacy factor has been defined as the primary for any political system, where he says a king who understands the true implication of diplomacy will definitely conquer the world. And this is when you see these two contemporary scholars and their disciples. One is the Alexander the Great that you know, and one is the Chandragupta Maurya. So look at these teachings and the influences and how the political geography shaped up in the ancient India. Right? So if you observe, it includes what matters? The matters of allocation and transfer of power in decision making, roles and systems of governance, and also international organizations, political behavior and public policies. And when we relate it to a particular location, a territory, a state, it becomes political geography. So the geographical component is what we are looking into in this particular discipline called political geography. So if you look into the political geography definition, it's basically studying the interaction between political activity of people, part of human geography that we talk about, an integral geographical space. And when we say geographical space, it pertains to a particular location, an area, a defined territory, a state, a nation. So all these concepts are very important in political geography that we are going to discuss in the lectures to come as well. So if you observe, the systems include physical, economic, social, cultural and political spaces in which we are going to look into the politics and its key components. So if you observe further, the nature of political geography. What is this subject all about? And when was this subject made as part of university system? So it is again the same process that we learned in evolution of geographical thought, that
that this subject was also made as one of the primary subjects when human geography developed, because it is core component of human geography, that is the political system. So if you observe, there are two-way relationship between geography and politics. So nature of the subject is this two-way relationship between politics on one hand and geography on one hand, how both of them are impacting each other. So if you observe this relationship, the first is politics of geography. And by this, what we mean? The politics of geography is the politics of knowledge. The ways in which political geographers and scholars have interacted with those in the world of real politics have varied over time. So if you observe that it could be that some geographers, some scholars, some social scientists made their theories so they were supporters of those in power. So for example, if you have read about political biases where the theories concerned were of Mackinder's heartland theory, Ratzel's organic theory of state, Bauman's work, Speakman's work, Rostow's and Pirot's work. So all these are in accordance with people associated in power and decision making in a given territory, in a given state. But what about others who contested this idea? So that's where the contesting or questioning those in power comes into the picture, where you'll find Richard Peet, David Harvey, and several other scholars who talks about questioning the modes of development. Right? So if you observe, regionalism and sectionalism could provide a good example of how geography shapes the politics. This is first kind of relationship, the relationship of politics of geography. Now the other way around, if you observe, is the second kind of relationship. What is it? Geography of politics. That what is the location of the political system and how that location matters in the world. So if you observe, it analyzes how politics, that is basically the tactics, the operations, shapes a geography of particular place, how maps change with politics, how locations and settlements pattern change with politics. So if you observe, for example, America, USA, United States of America, has a political system which is democratic as well as territorial organization linked together. So an amalgamation of territory with the importantly democratic rule. So what you observe here, this is a very unique system in itself where territorial representation is as important as the vote of people. Then if you observe the other ways around, democratic rule in which public policies and officials are directly chosen through the popular vote, and where territorial organization is a system of government to formally structure it in terms of area, in terms of social groups. So when we implement, where do we implement? At state level, national level, city level, from the panchayat system to the central, where do we implement these policies derived from the power generated through the vote politics? So this is what we say is geography of politics. Now if you observe further, the state power, which is the key ingredient in any political system, so therefore it is applied with geographical units. So we need to identify geographical units very specifically in order to see that where the state power is implemented. So that is the basic nature of political geography. Now further, if you observe, there have been numerous scholars, and in detail we'll be talking in separate lecture about the evolution of the subject matter, but for now, how it was defined by people. So the first kind of definitions in modern political geography comes from this scholar who was a German geographer, Friedrich Ratzel. And in his work, Political Geography, 1897, in which he published numerous concepts, he defined political geography for the first time. And remember, he compared the state to an organism. So this is also called social Darwinism. After Darwin takes that Darwinism concept and puts it in different systems. So Ratzel put it in political system and gives this organic theory of state and also the concept of living space, and enhancing that living space through the concepts of Lebensraum, which was a great influencer in Nazi politics, if you remember. Now comes the next part. 1922, if you observe, Derwent Whittlesey proposed a standard definition of political geography as study of areal differentiation based on political phenomena. Right? So how one area is different on the basis of politics that is practiced in that area. So that was one part. Then if you observe, the next definition comes from Carlos R., who was talking in terms of morphology of a landscape. And remember, the construction of landscape where politics of space is very important. So he also talked about something very interesting called wayward child of geographical science. Then if you further observe the definition by Richard Hartshorne, which is in modern geography most accepted definition, and he talks about the science of political ideas, study of state as characteristic of areas in relation to the other characteristics of the area. It means the political characteristics and other characteristics interaction. If we study in a specific area, that is what we study as subject matter of political geography. Then further, if you observe the Goblet definition of 1955, post-World War II definition. So if you look here, the definition: study of political territorial units, borders and administrative subdivisions. This is very simplistic definition. Then further, if you observe, Alexander in 1963 defined that political geography is about the study of political territorial units, borders and administrative subdivisions, a little modified from the earlier definition. And then further, few more scholars came. For example, Bernard Cohen, he defined it as the spatial consequences of political processes. So if the political processes are in a particular way, the consequence will be visible on the space through the map, through the territoriality, through the definition of territory and the definition of state. Then further, if you observe John Agnew's definition, so the study of how politics is informed by geography. And then the modern definition in today's world by Vladimir Kolosov, ex-president of International Geographical Union, who is a great political geographer himself. He defines it as interaction between political activity of people and integral geographical space, which includes what all factors? Remember, physical factors, economic factors, social cultural factors, political spaces. So all these coming together forming a political system in a given space. That's how political geography is defined. Now further, if you observe this particular diagram, it talks about the scale component of political geography. How it is scaled, if you observe, from international level, international relations or geopolitics, to the study of state, to the study of localities, and to the ground. And alongside it, what you have in the triangle is power, politics, policy. So the interactions between these three is what will shape up the triangle. The triangle is the geographical space that we talk about, right? So political geography is about interaction of these entities, triangle of space, place, and territory. And in this triangle, that is the space, what is important? Spatial patterns, spatial relationships, and that is the core component of geography. That's how political geography is, this combination of power, politics, policy in the given space at a given scale. Right? Now if you observe various approaches to political geography. So in total there are about 6 approaches of political geography. Out of these 6 approaches, if you observe, the 4 approaches, that is the top 4 approaches, was given by Richard Hartshorne. So what are the top 4 approaches? Let's look into it one by one. First is the power approach, power analysis approach, that where the power vests in and how the power shapes of the geography. Right? So for non-geographers and geographers, both of them, this approach is very important, right? So non-geographers perceive geography as significant power resource. For example, it divides national power into 5 components: geographic, economic, political, sociological, military. That's how non-geographers do it. But what about geographers? They do it a little differently. So while geographical approach of power is based on location, size and shape of area, then degree to which land is arable or barren, then you have effect of climate and also reservoir of natural resources with which the land is endowed. These things matter for a geographer in terms of political space, right? So further, if you observe, a fully geographical approach will have the inventory of these key elements. For example, the physical environment, how is it? What are the landforms, climate, soil, vegetation, water bodies? Then movement of people and also transportation, communication lines, then raw materials, population size, body politic, that is various kind of administrative forms, ideals, goals, expressions, and space, that is the core component of geographer. So impact of all these on the given space. So this is what comprises the first kind of approach in political geography. Then comes the second approach. What is it? Historical approach. So the word says it historically, the chronological approach rather than spatial approach. So the chronological approach will tell us how things have evolved through time, how the map of a particular state has changed from ancient to medieval to modern, how it has changed from colonial times to the post-colonial times. So this is a timeline approach, if you observe, where from indigenous society you have developed as a modern society, and the boundaries have changed, the definitions have changed, the characteristics of spaces have changed, right? So it is very obvious approach that it happens because of political circumstances. For example, the Vedic age map of India, if you observe, to the Mughal rule, to the British rule and present map of India, is it similar? No, there are significant changes in it. That's what is historical approach. Then comes the third approach, which is morphological approach. Now the word itself is morph, means shape approach, shape of the territory or the state which is in question. So form and structure relationship is very important part of this subject. And external morphological attributes include size, shape, location, boundaries, and internal morphology includes core areas, capital city, cultural regions, right? So if you observe the basic idea of patterns and structural features, so let's look into the patterns. What does it all include? It refers to the arrangement of the phenomena of a space. So for example, power units, national states, regional blocks, global alliances, and their location, size, and shape. What pattern does it show on the space? And the second one is structure, of course. What is the structure? It refers to the spatial features in terms of population, economy, capitals, boundaries, underdeveloped or otherwise problem units that we define. So this is the structure. So shape and structure, or form and structure put together, forms this approach in studying political geography. Then what we have is the fourth and very important approach in today's world, functional approach. It talks about the function of a particular state. So it is concerned with functioning of an area in terms of political unit. So every political unit has a specific function, and also it has many subordinate organizations and making it an entire functional unit. So what you observe here, there are numerous internal functions and external functions of a state. That's why we say the dual functionality of a state. So internal function means what? Passage across interstate lines, movement of people, goods, services, flows, and the administration and political things related to the exchange internally, like interracial relations, internal organization, while external functions, as the word says, outside. So you have territorial relationships, you have economic relations, political relations, strategic relations, all these that we study in international relations as well. So if you observe further, the fifth approach, which is post-Hartshorne approach, which was added later on, is the behavioral approach. Remember, behavioralism became important in geography in 1970s. So what do you observe through this approach? Behavior, stimuli, perception, response of people, attitude of people towards the different states, different countries became very important in this approach. So through behavior approach, these four components are important. What is the individual behavior? What is the sum total aggregate behavior of a mass, of a group, of an institution? Then what is the spatial behavior? One location people behave differently, political systems behave differently, the others behave differently. And then territorial behavior, right? That who possesses the territory, who occupies it, and how the state defends that territory, right? What are the behavioral things related to that? So that is the behavioral approach. And then what we have is the sixth and the last, that is the systems approach, right? So in evolution of geographical thought, we studied this systems theory, behavioral theories. So if you observe, systematic approach says the entire political systems, which is based on general systems theory. So it means the political geography system is basically made up of several components, right, which holds together to make it function. So if you observe further, the geopolitical system that we say has these two major components. What is the first component? The process component, right? And the second is geographical space. So these two components keep interacting. They have spatial interactions going on. So political transactions, structures, societal forces interact with these, that is place, area, region, landscape. And this interaction forms a geopolitical unit. That's where we study political geography of a system. So that's the systematic approach. Then further, if you observe, what is the scope of political geography in today's world? Have you seen today's world divided into several regional units in terms of international trade, international politics, and their alignments? So if you observe, NAFTA is here, CARICOM, Mercosur, then you have EFTA, European Union, several of these African unions, then you have SAARC in South Asia, Asian nations, Pacific Islands Forum, Commonwealth of Independent States, where the states come together with a common line, a common theme, and they align themselves. So this is how the world looks divided in these ways, right? So the scope is to study these newer systems and the ever-evolving changing systems. So if you observe, political geography is varied and has a wide-ranging field of learning and research. And also, it is ever-evolving, it is dynamic, it keeps changing. So the field of political geography grew from geographers' interest into these ever-evolving state and its characteristic changes, right? So if you observe further, political geography is the analysis of how these political systems, these patterns, these structures changes at different scales, in different spaces, in different time. So it focuses on one hand that how groups interact, particularly the ways they manipulate each other in controlling the resources. On the other hand, the scope of political geography is also to look into how these social, economic and political activities determine the land use, determine the modification of a particular place and also the resource basis. So this is the major scope in today's world. And if you further observe, look at what's happening around the world, the military deployments across the world, the regional conflicts that is there. So you can observe these maps, annexation of Crimea in 2014 by Russia, and right now Russia-Ukraine conflict as you see. So political geography is ever evolving field at international level as well as at state and country level. So if you observe in India, we already have so many river disputes. If you observe interstate water sharing and river disputes, and also the boundary disputes between different states and territories. So this is to be studied, and the ever evolving politics of people around it, the governments change, the things change, the theories change, and so does the map. So if you observe, the changes are to be studied, and that is where the future lies. So a political geographer looks into all these phenomena and also tries to bring out certain theories and also the solutions to certain problems through various strategies. So if you observe, the major themes in political geography are listed out here. So what are we going to study in the entire political geography? These theme-based concepts. So territory and territoriality, then state and its elements, geopolitics, then you have nation and nationalism, identity and citizenship, electoral geography, and environmental politics. This is where the political geography is heading towards. So future is definitely going to be environmental politics, and it's already showing up right since Paris Agreement, COP meet, and since then the evolution of the different organizations at world level and different steps that we are taking, and the politics of resource control, ocean control. Remember, we talked about what's happening in South China Sea, what's happening in Antarctica in earlier lectures as well. So if you observe, there are some common lines of thought, some common hypotheses in political geography to be researched and studied further. What are these? So let's look at the list. The first two is advanced cultures and civilizations do not develop in climates which are extremely hot or cold. This is one hypothesis. Is it true or false? It's for you to understand and check whether this statement is true or not. Then nations which are located in isolated areas of the world and away from major friction zones have an attitude establishing a society without outside interference. And then what you observe, the next hypothesis, nations which are located in physical proximity to a major superpower or in friction zone are more apt to be doing what? Involved in power politics. Do you see that happening in the world? Then look into it. Landlocked nations are at disadvantages in the world trade. Check it. Then further, topography of a nation plays pivotal role in determining the sound national defense. So how topography and national defense is related? Do you have some examples? Look into these areas, right? Then nations' resources determine the economic and often the political, social prosperity of the nation. Then further, if you observe, industrialized nations are dependent on availability of raw materials, and development of free or less restrictive trade policies also can reduce international tensions. Then further, if you observe, nations which have been established on the basis of artificial boundaries are less cohesive, right, and suffer more frequent international dissensions than those countries which have defined natural boundaries. And recent technological advancement in weaponry, including nuclear weapons and sophisticated programs like missile and bomb programs and other alternatives, have altered international relations in terms of geography, in terms of power, in terms of policy making. Do you find that happening in the world? So these hypotheses are for you to find out, research, and look into the entire world, what's happening in the world politics, right? And also what's happening in India, between the states, between center and states. So do check and see where the scope of political geography lies.
So now, when we have discussed in details the various aspects of nature, approaches, and scope of political geography, in the sessions to come, we'll be talking more on other aspects of political geography. So stay tuned, stay safe, keep learning, keep watching, and don't forget to share the videos, and please do subscribe to our channel. All my best wishes to you.